Good afternoon, everyone. So we're here to talk about what is probably one of the major themes which everyone's interested to learn more about, and there's no more better brains to learn that from than the people here assembled on this panel today. So I'm just going to ask you guys very briefly, if you wouldn't mind, just giving a quick bio on yourselves, just introducing who you are, what you do, and where you're at. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, I'll start. I'm Fergus Weldon. I'm the Director of Data Science at Trainline. And I lead a team of scientists and engineers trying to solve customer problems all around rail and coach travel across Europe.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Finlay Clark. I'm the UK Country Manager for Waze. Hopefully you'll be familiar with Waze. We're the crowdsourced app that tries to see all the nonsense on the roads and route you around it so you're not stuck in it. My job at Waze is to run the UK business, so responsible for partnerships, for growth of the app in the UK, and for revenue.
My name is Charbel, and I'm from NVIDIA. I run the AI City. My job is about pushing deep learning and artificial intelligence into the ecosystem to derive applications that change the world, the urban technology we live in.
Thank you. So a lot of people claim they have AI at the center of their businesses. A lot of people are using it really as a marketing slogan. But what do you see as the current state of AI today in business genuinely? Maybe we can start with yourself.
Yeah, and maybe I can just give a commercial perspective on this. I think a lot of the chat in the news is around new advances in academic research and algorithms and methods. But when you try and apply that in the business sense, it's a bit more Wild West. You don't have highly structured data like audio or images. And when you try and mix different data sets together, the problems actually become quite hard to solve. So I would say we're probably from a commercial setting, it can be hard to scale AI in a business like that, purely because the data sets are constantly changing. And in a lot of the cases, you're not using your own data. You're using data that could be from another service that you're not responsible for. So I think currently, we're just beginning on that journey from a commercial point of view.
Great. And Charbel, I know you have some views on how deep learning is now really becoming the cutting edge of what we're doing now. What are your views on the application of that?
I think AI has been around for a long, long time, and it's misused, abused as a term. So I like to focus on deep learning because this is where things are really cool and changing, transforming the world. And I think we reach a point where we have enough compute power, we know it as GPU or equivalent, that allows us to do the computational that deep learning requires, where machines do actually learn on their own and then self-recode themselves to do things at a scale, to play with the data at a scale, being video, being text, etc. And I think today, because my job is to work with startups, I'm seeing amazing applications. I just came from a startup called Sequester. And what they do is they look at police forensic evidence, and they imagine each hour of video, a policeman or a police workforce will spend 4 hours sipping through to find an evidence. Today, you have machines that can do that for you. So when you start moving it into real application, okay, there are sensitivity around certain topics, but the power of technology today allows you to do things at a scale, but also things that were not possible humanly before.
Finlay, maybe you can give us some examples at Waze where you're seeing AI being applied and where you see that moving to now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think any company with a pretty decent data source are doing certain things. So there's this sort of pattern recognition stuff on one hand that we do a lot of, which is things like, effectively, we think next quarter we're going to have this amount of users. How is our systems going to be able to cope? And you can make predictions for that. We have an advertising business with thousands of advertisers, and you can begin to predict which ones are likely to churn based on their behaviors. Are they in using our software to change their ads or what have you? We can do things such as look at which groups of people are most likely to respond well to a push notification, because we notify our users if, say, the marathon's on and you're going to be affected by the road closures, where you live and where you drive will impact, should that be relevant to you. All that stuff, I would say, is kind of machine learning 101. I think where it gets slightly interesting is where you start, for us, we've got this huge traffic data source, and we're beginning to think about ways, how do we kind of put new features in using machine learning? So a really kind of good example would be motorcycle mode. So any motorcyclists in the room, you'll notice that you can drive at different speeds than cars. Now, we've kind of mapped the whole world, and we've got 300 million segments of road that our systems know roughly how long it takes a car to drive through those 300 million segments, depending on what time of day it is. And the algorithm for our routing engine is very sophisticated. We've been working on it for 10 years. But when we wanted to launch motorcycle mode, we had this thing where we didn't actually want to completely replicate the 300 million segments to work out how long does it take a motorcyclist to do this. So we got some beta testers from our Waze community who said, we are motorcyclists and we're happy to be part of this experiment. And what we did was we looked at how long it took motorcycles to go through the same segments. And bearing in mind, it changes based on how wide the roads are, what time of day it is it a city road, is it a rural road? And as a result, we rolled out motorcycle mode last year at the end of November, and it is effectively completely inferred from that kind of experiment that we've done. So we've not had to create a whole new routing algorithm. We've just, if you're a motorcyclist user now, Waze has a perfect option for you based on that. So it's those types of examples where you can launch new features pretty quickly with the help of machine learning done in a smart way.
That's fascinating. Maybe, Fergus, you can give some examples from your own experience as well.
Yeah, so one of our latest features, what we call price prediction, is all about when you do a search in the Trainline app and it's a couple of weeks out and you're kind of just cursively planning for your journey, we want to give you a sense of when that price might expire, so when it might rise. Yeah. And it's quite a nice machine learning model because it's a very defined set of constraints. And that, while it's quite simple to kind of articulate what the problem is and how to present that to the customer, actually getting that to do it at scale it can be difficult. We use, I think, over 10 to 15 billion data points when we refresh the model every day. So that's quite exciting. We've seen a great customer experience come out of that. We've saved people, I think, over £9 million so far this year by highlighting the fact that you should buy this price or this ticket now because it's going to expire today or tomorrow, which leads to a better customer experience and hopefully more people using the train.
Excellent. Charbel, I know you've seen a lot of startups. NVIDIA is obviously at the heart of a lot of these things. Are there any other examples you'd like to cite from your recent experience?
There's quite few. I mean, I think what's happening in the market today is a process of AI democratization, which means we're trying to push it into the market in a way that it becomes easy programmable. So startups can take a product with a software development kit and a ready-made architecture and develop value on the top. What we're seeing happening here is a lot of application in safety, security, transport, mobility, and retail. So for example, airports, which we have some of the startups deploying solution in airports where if you registered with the airport, your security is seamless. You don't need to present anything. The camera is already there. It will recognize you and you keep going. You just have to opt in for it. Retailers, they have cameras today detecting who's a cashier, who's a customer, actually looking at the product that you're looking at, creating the time management, the throughput, even checkout is automatic if you sign into it. There's a lot of capability now, but we're in a pre-chasm mode, if you want. It's an early adopter situation because it's new, and actually it's challenging because people have to understand what you're doing to adopt it. So you have to go through a journey of proof of concept, but the bulk of the application I see that's happening is also in asset predictive maintenance. So for example, you have machine walking on the pavement and just a camera and marking the pavement that requires replacement or fixing. You have a lot of application. We have actually in London, robots are in the sewage now being trained because in AI you have two things. You have the training and you have the inferencing. So you need, for example, that's why we put an edge-to-cloud architecture to allow this. You take that training on the server side, on the cloud side, because it requires a massive amount of compute, And when it learns, you move it to the edge through an intelligent device where you do the inferencing and the local decision-making process. So you have robots today with human in the sewage looking at rodents, how they're causing a massive issue. And then they're going to put a robot once the machine is trained. This is happening in many applications, but it's not at a scale yet because we're just the top of the iceberg, if you want. We're starting to learn what we can do.
Thank you. So you mentioned the edge of the cloud, and I think that brings us to, what do you think are the current restrictions to the widespread adoption of AI? Maybe we start with kind of Waze experience and that, and what you think generally within the market.
So in our experience, I think you still need quite a team of people to do in-depth machine learning experiments on big data sets. So I was chatting to our team about this, and they said, well, in order for you to really do this at scale, you need to be a researcher, probably a statistician, probably a software engineer. You need to be able to scale, and you need to be able to deploy. And actually, that's not one person. That's actually a team of people, and we're fortunate enough at Waze where we do have people like that, and we're doing experiments here. But actually, even with the tools that are available now, such as cloud, ML, these big data sets you can kind of put on your problems. The truth is that you kind of need to wear many hats just to be able to get something off the ground. So that's probably the first one. And then the second one would be actually this, let's imagine you put your machine learning experiment into action, and it comes up with something that you didn't expect it to come out with, which is a lot of times what happens. Now, there takes actually a bit of kind of emotional gut for you to actually go, right, we're going to trust what this experiment has thrown out. None of us saw this coming, and actually we found that actually selling that in to senior leadership, i.e., well, machine learning's come up with this. There's actually a bit easier to implement things where someone goes, this was my code, this was how we did the experiment. When it's abstract, it can be a bit harder. So there's one kind of technical and one more sort of emotional around how quickly you want to adopt these things into your business.
So Fergus, how would you say you build teams that data-focused, AI-ready at Trainline? How do you go about that?
I think data as a whole, is going through almost such a seismic, business is going through a seismic change into everybody wants to be a data-driven organization. And while everybody wants to say they're data-driven, it's not actually that easy. Because in the world of big data that we live in now, it becomes a very big problem that there isn't enough patterns out there that people can copy in terms of how to handle that kind of big data set. So you could have all the data scientists in the world to kind of highlight your point. If you don't have either the data or the engineering support there, then you're not really going to get the benefit of the investment of that team. Just recently, actually, we've restructured our team at Trainline, so we now have a data science team, and we also have a machine learning team, to kind of, I suppose, differentiate between those two, where the scientist is responsible for building and understanding what the problem is and building that machine learning model, but then actually scaling that into production, in your instance, is actually a different problem set. It's a software engineering. It's much more tech engineering based. So it has been an interesting journey over the past 2.5 years for me to try and articulate that, that you have to have a good foundation at the very base where you capture your data and everything trickles up from there. And at the very top of that pyramid, for me, is AI. And if you don't have everything that's underneath that pyramid, then I suppose it's going to take you longer, and it's going to be a harder road to get to where you want to be.
Interesting. So, Charbel, if you kind of move that from kind of the micro to the macro, and we look at urban spaces, smart cities, how do you see us best developing the data sets and then applying those with AI and deep learning in those environments?
One of the biggest challenges is the topic we're talking about is, for our audience, is a understandable topic. But when you go into older generation, it's a very difficult topic to understand because there is a perception and a misunderstanding of the topic. So that is a fact we have to acknowledge. And the good news is 54% of the population today is born after 1980, which means generation Y and Z. So your generation, guys, I'm already behind the curve. But which means they will be taking the reign very soon, and that will become. So over time, we will shift. The challenge you have today is talent. You pointed about it. So a lot of people are working. We have a deep learning institute. I encourage you to go online. We have some free courses, AI Demystified, and a few others. It's about breaking that barrier. So that's one. The second one is you need to have a digital strategy, because the implementation of technology is it's not a hobby. It's a very expensive hobby. It has to solve problems. And the third one is you need to have a data store, because all what you're talking about is based on reliable data, etc. So you need the data. When you look around in the city, the data is distributed in department, in enterprise, in public domain, structured, unstructured. So this is, to me, is a challenge. Now, in Waze and Trainline, I think most of your data, and correct me if I'm wrong, is structured and under your control. So you can rely on it. But if you want to start expanding to social media or web to get sentiments of people and whatnot, it's more complicated. Now, in the cities, some of the data is on COBOL, on Excel sheet, on printout. So we need to first fix the foundation, which is the data. And then once you have the data, you need to put it in a reliable electronic data store. And then the startup will do magic with it. And we've seen it with Transport for London. When they opened the data store, within, I think, 6 months, they had 65 apps on smartphones that we're using, most of us. So people will do with the data, just enable it. So to me, smart city is happening, is a movement that is slowly happening, but where the stars are aligned, if you want.
I mean, yeah, just building on that point around smart cities, not a lot of people know this, but at Waze, we do have open data, and we share with over 600 departments of transportation around the world, including Transport for London here. And what's been really interesting with this is some of the insights you get. So Wazers report incidents and accidents on the road when they see crashes. And Transport for London in their Palestra office, which is a sort of 24/7, 365-day in operation for road, surface, and transport, they have a direct feed, anonymous user reports, and they've worked out that it's very, very accurate, first of all, of where accidents have taken place. But secondly, it's quicker than a lot of their usual sources. And this is because it's a lot easier to report an accident on Waze than it is to pull over to the side of the road, phone 999, and when you phone 999, it goes to the emergency services, then it might go to the police, and then it might end up at TfL. But with our partnership with TfL, we've actually gone straight to source, and they've got people who are looking at this, and we've actually got an ability that we can actually, with our data, cluster enough, applied machine learning to cluster enough incidents. If we see enough accidents, we can tell our partners, hey, look, this is one big accident, and they can point CCTV onto it pretty quickly and begin to kind of respond and resolve. And the people that run the surface transport at TfL say things like, you're our eyes and ears on the ground. So it's amazing how something like crowdsourced information 2 years ago, people wouldn't say, well, that's not that reliable, what have you. But we've got many, many instances where crowdsourced information with clever technology, open data, is making real differences in smart cities.
We're actually, on that, we've built something very, very similar for the UK Rail, where we did some investigation about what happens when trains are delayed, cancelled, or major disruptions, and we found the quickest source of information was Twitter. And in the UK, each of the train operators operate their own Twitter handle, and they push out to the industry, but they also push out to their customers and users of the rail network through Twitter. So what we decided to do was use Twitter as a source of information, and then we've used some machine learning to translate that into something that we can match to a customer or match to a journey, with the idea that we should make it as personalized as possible. So if a disruption happens somewhere on the network and you're either scheduled to go there today or tomorrow, or you're there now, you will get some context about that, but it's super personalized.
Right. So, Charbel, you talked about the split in the generations. If you take automation, if you're going to look at Generation Z, how is automation and AI going to affect that generation?
I mean, think about it this way. We have around 40% of the population, they don't know a world without internet or a smartphone. I mean, my generation, the Prius was the highlight of automotive. This generation is the Tesla generation. Next one is going to be the autonomous car one. So the world is changing. So if I look at my generation, I can handle one device at a time. When I look at the young generation, they're playing on the PlayStation and then have a phone and talking to whatever. They have 4 or 5 devices manipulating at this. I think that picture is familiar to many of you. So this is transforming into the world we live in, commercially, enterprise. That's why you're seeing we're consuming services differently. That's why you have Spotify that changed the music industry. That's why you have Uber changed it, and so on and so forth. Now, when you look at what's happening in a 1 minute of internet from social media and whatnot, I'm not going to go there. I'm going to tell you, wait till you see what's happening in the 1 minute of Internet of Things. You have 2,000 devices being connected every minute right now, somewhere in the world. A sensor, a camera, a gate, a power control, all of them are connected. So this all will end up eventually moving into transforming the business by disrupting the business and creating new business models. So the new competition will be companies like Trainline, like Waze, like those guys. It's not the traditional business that I'm used to or you're used to. I don't know if where I put you, with them or with me. But the point is, the whole generation of disruption of business is coming. It's all derived on something, some we know, we predict. Most of it we don't even predict and expect. And it will change everything. And this is the new generation that's enabling this, because technology consumed by them differently than it was by me.
So Fergus, if we take, say, the travel industry, how do you see the adoption of AI developing and evolving the industry as a whole?
Well, I think in general, we'll start to see, or we'll continue to see, kind of small iterations built on top of academic research and the adoption of those by commercial-based companies and travel-based companies. But I would like to see not only transportation, but also cities adapting to their populations, right? There's no need to, necessarily run a train at 11 a.m. if nobody's going to use it. So I'd like to see a world where travel is responsive to the demand of the population. So, I'm not really sure what the statistics of what percentage of people now work from home 2-3 days a week, but that's changing commuting patterns. And the definition of a commute is also changing. So I'd like to see AI and machine learning and data kind of help with that, with that kind of acceleration towards something that's a bit more demand-driven, which will have efficiencies for the travel industry, but also have efficiencies for everybody as a whole.
Right. We only, unfortunately, have 5 minutes left in this fascinating subject. So what I'd like maybe to ask each of you is what you feel will be the most exciting developments of AI that we'll see and deep learning in our lifetimes. And maybe, if I could start with yourself.
I believe when we see the physical space and the virtual world are blurring and merging together, I think for the next 30 years, it's going to be all about virtual reality, augmented reality, and you guys talk about machine learning. I believe it's the era of deep learning. What I mean by that is the machine writing a code for itself to enhance its performance without human intervention. And this is what I see is the trend in enterprise and cities and et cetera.
So from our side, I think, if you were to go back 15 years, just as the mobile sort of revolution was happening, and people would say, oh, look, you're going to get weather on your phone, you're going to get email on your phone. People would be like, ah, great, that's like the demos. But actually, it was pretty hard to predict that you'd also get Waze and Uber and Snapchat and Instagram. So it's pretty difficult to predict. I think a lot of things with machine learning at the moment is you're seeing demos. It's not actually what the technology is going to be able to do. So an example would be like DeepMind and the guy AlphaGo, or DeepMind have taught computer games to be like amazing at those computer games, right? It's a demo. What that technology will do in the future remains to be seen. But I think in our space, it's pretty obvious to us in transportation and within cars that cars are going to have full of sensors. Cars are going to be able to know not just where the nearest petrol station is, but which one's cheapest today. They're going to be able to know if all the cars in front of you start braking all of a sudden, what should you do? I think, it's a long way before you get into a car and it's fully a level 5 autonomous and you just say, drive me home. You're going to have a long way of assisted driving before then. And that presents a lot more interesting stuff. I mean, time spent in car can be a lot more productive if you don't have to be holding the steering wheel on the motorway, for instance. There are whole industries that will creep up, things like curbside delivery. If you know exactly where you're going to be in a city at a certain point of time, you can pick up some groceries so you don't need to send someone else out to deliver them, potentially. So I think, we're really at the tip of the iceberg, where I think on transportation, and there's going to be a whole more host of innovations come in this space.
Right.
I think with respect to Trainline, we kind of are fixated on the customer and the customer's problems and reducing the friction of travel. And I would hope that we get to a point where the customer experience of travel on coach and rail and other modes of transport are so seamless that people automatically opt for that, and which is better. It's better for everybody. It's better for the environment. It's better for our cities, and it's better for mobility as well. And I do believe we can get there if we focus on the customer and the customer's experience, and just providing that first-class level of service.
So my last question, it's a nice binary one, just a yes or a no. Do you think the singularity is a possibility? To each of you. You could go first.
Well, to a certain extent, yes. Because if we look at I think it was Mr. Coswell, the Google CTO that wrote that book. All right. If you look at the past 60 years, it proved to be heading in that direction. The question is, would it continue? Now, I believe Moore's Law is coming to an end, or it's slowing down. But when we thought it's over, we had new invention GPUs. They're going now at double the speed every single year. A new chip, etc. It's a new market, it's a new industry. Would it be possible? Yes, I believe so.
You're a yes.
Yes.
I'm going to give you a very political answer and say...
It's got to be yes or no.
No, well, I think, you talk about that singularity. I would say when you speak to people working on AI, what they're probably trying to work on is how to fix autocorrect on your iPhone. And that is the problem with the dialogue at the moment is you're asking questions like that, and the people working on them are trying to solve problems like this.
Yeah.
So I think there's a...
You're swerving it. I get it.
So he's a no.
He's a no.
I think for me that AI will get to the point where if it's as good as we want it to be, we won't realize it's there. And if the singularity happens, then it's already too late.
Right, so I'm just going to ask the audience, show of hands, who thinks the singularity is a possibility? Yes or no? Yeses, hands up, please. Not that many. That's interesting. Well, guys, thank you very much. It's been a fascinating session. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause to our panelists.